Everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm so happy to be here. I was telling Emma this morning, I'm a mentor at UD as well, and I'm always telling all the students the best professional group to join is SHRM because one, if you ever want to do leadership, you're going to have to deal with HR, and if you might as well network with all the people that are hiring people in the state. So I'm always trying to push college students towards you guys. It's a great organization, so really happy to be here. Let me go ahead and share my screen so you can see my slides. There we go. All right, so as Emma said, I'm from the University of Delaware's Conflict Resolution Program. We do specialize in special education mediation, and we design customized trainings for clients to come into organizations and teach about conflict resolution, conflict management, communication skills, some of the things that we're going to touch on today. We do have a basic mediation training that's coming up. It is a 4-day certificate program. It's absolutely fabulous. It's at the Buena Vista Center in Newcastle. The meals are provided. You're going to learn about, in expanded depth what we're talking about today. It's going to empower you to be able to mediate conflicts, learn how to be a neutral party, and help two parties be able to come to a mutual agreement. It's an excellent skill to have, to put in your tool belt, excellent thing to put on your resume. So if this is something you're interested in, I'm going to be sharing the flyer with Emma. You'll get all the slides after the presentation and all those good things. And I hope that I will see you there because it's a great, great training. So what is our agenda for today? First, we're going to learn about some effective communication skills. Almost always when you're having challenges with difficult people, there's also some past history of breakdown in communication. So we're going to kind of go over that more generally, and then we're going to do a breakout session where you're going to get to practice how to active listen, and then we're going to come back and we're going to kind of go through more specific difficult personality types. And what I always like to say for this training is that in the reality, we're all difficult people, right? We all have our quirks and ways that people are constantly accommodating us and our personalities in ways that we don't always perceive. So you might find yourself identifying with one of these personality types. And what is so empowering about that is once you learn about these things and become more cognizant and aware of it, is that one, you can get better at helping other people, and you can get better at expressing yourself of like what is the best way to communicate with you to make you a pleasant person, not a difficult person, right? Because we all have our buttons. So this is all to make us more aware and to be able to help other people. So the most important thing with this too is realizing, we're not thinking machines that feel, but rather we are feeling machines that think. I love that quote. Anything to do with difficult people, challenges, conflict, workplace, emotions are involved, and it's just something that we have to accept about life, right? We have to accept that we cannot always separate our feelings from what is going on, and that actually the best way to deal with things is to accept your feelings, process them, and then be able to move forward. But what people often try to do is push everyone's feelings aside their own, cut it out, and just like get to the task at hand. That's just not sustainable, right? Because we are people, not robots. And we want to recognize and appreciate each other's differences. What are our underlying biases? Everyone comes from a different background. We've all been talked about this stuff before. I'm sure you all as HR are very aware of this. But this is just always something important to keep in mind, even when you're dealing with a situation where you feel like this person is being so difficult. You don't know all of the underlying and background things that are going on that's maybe making this person react in this certain way. So we're going to start with a fun video. I'm going to stop my share for a second so I can pull it up. Okay. Yeah. Okay, can everybody see that? We're good? Okay.
It's just, there's all this pressure you know? And sometimes it feels like it's right up on me and I can just feel it, like literally feel it in my head, and it's relentless. And I don't know if it's going to stop. I mean, that's the thing that scares me the most, is that I don't know if it's ever going to stop.
Yeah. Well, you do have a nail in your head.
It is not about the nail.
Are you sure? Because, I mean, I'll bet if we got that out of there...
Stop trying to fix it.
No, I'm not trying to fix it. I'm just pointing out that maybe the nail is causing...
You always do this. You always try to fix things when what I really need is for you to just listen.
No, see, I don't think that is what you need. I think what you need is to get the nail
See, you're
out.
not even listening now.
Okay, fine. I will listen. Fine.
It's just... sometimes it's like there's this achy... I don't know what it is. And I'm not sleeping very well at all. And all my sweaters are snagged. I mean, all of them.
Yeah, that sounds really hard.
It is. Thank you. Ow!
Oh, come on. Ow. If you would just...
Don't...
Try to see things my way. Do I have to keep...
So, I mean, that's just a great video, right? Like, it's so funny. I actually got that video from a marriage class that I took. It was just fabulous, and just goes to show how, a lot of times we just want to get to the problem, right, before we listen. But because he wasn't willing to just listen to how she felt first, he was trying to push her to the problem-solving phase, right? They weren't able to kind of get moving forward, right? So that's a good humorous way to express that one. Okay, let me pull my slides up again. Okay, so what is active listening? It means giving 100% of your attention to the speaker. And while you're active listening, you're trying to listen to understand their point of view of how they feel, what they want, and why they want it. And active listening is also an opportunity to confirm to the person speaking that you heard and understood them correctly. And this is important because, believe it or not, I know it doesn't seem like this sometimes, people actually need and want to be heard and understood more than they actually need or want to be agreed with. And I really see this a lot in mediation. Especially for special education mediation, this is dealing with parents and children and schools. It's a lot of emotion. But once people feel heard and understood, they can come to resolution. So as I'm teaching you this process, just trust it and try it, and it will work. Probably the hardest thing about active listening is listening to understand rather than formulating your response. Most conversations, they tend to, especially if they're heated, they tend to escalate and move very quickly and very fast. And so as you're listening, you're thinking of the next thing to say. But this is a different strategy where you're really listening to understand, because you're going to need to be able to summarize and restate to that person to confirm that you actually really did understand what they said. So the speaker should be able to walk away assured that you understand their point of view. When people don't feel understood or heard, you'll find yourself circling the drain. And what I mean by this is you'll find that the argument just keeps going around in a circle, right? And you're not getting anywhere. And that is a cue actually to remind yourself, like, oh, I need to practice some active listening skills and get to the root of the problem, because probably what we're circling on the surface is not really what the problem is. So I actually like to say this, if you're ever in a conflict, you just say it out, like, I feel like we're circling the drain here. And then you can practice some of these skills, right? So why is active listening the key to problem solving? It's because when we're emotional, we're upset, our prefrontal cortex actually starts to shut down, and you can't rationally think. So when you're active listening, you're going from the person being upset to you're helping pop the top, right, off of all those emotions and feelings to then move them from the emotional mind to the rational mind so that then they can problem solve and you'll be able to get to a solution. Because people are uncomfortable with emotions, because people are uncomfortable with conflict, they always try to skip this step, this active listening step, the hearing the person's feelings. And sometimes we don't want to ask clarifying questions or hear people's feelings because we're afraid about what they're going to say, right? What information is going to be brought up that I'm going to have to deal with. So we always try to skip that step, but you just can't. It is absolutely crucial and vital to pop the top, get the person's mind out of the emotional into the rational so that you can solve problems. So how do you do that? There's a couple ways, right? You're summarizing and restating. So summarizing is when you acknowledge the main points and feelings that expressed by the speaker, and you're doing that in your own words, right? So you're not saying back word for word everything that they said, but after they've expressed yourself, you're summarizing their main points and then asking, like, is that correct? Did I get it? And, they're going to tell you, right, whether or not that is really what they meant. And then doing that back and forth of summarizing and restating is going to clarify that. So restating is when you're saying back to them, especially about their feelings, right? You want to acknowledge the emotion. So you want to start with that, saying like, oh, wow, it sounds like you're really sad, or it sounds like you're very upset, or it sounds like you're frustrated, or you're angry, right? You must acknowledge the emotion and then summarize the context of what they said. An important thing to do, probably especially in your role as HR managers, professionals, is to launder the language. So if someone's really irate and upset, you don't want to say back to them, right, in exactly the same irate and upset words that they used, right? So part of your job is when you're listening and getting ready to summarize and restate is how am I going to kind of neutralize this while still acknowledging the emotion, but neutralizing the context, right? And that's part of what you're doing as the active listener to maybe even help kind of diffuse the situation. The next thing that you're doing as you're active listening is you're uncovering interests, right? What they want, what they're coming to you, the first thing that they're saying, right? This is just the tip of the iceberg. And then everything that's underneath that of why they want it, the experiences, the fears, the concerns, the beliefs, the values, that's what you have to get to. And you have to get to that by asking good questions. Never assume that when somebody's coming to you and they're upset or they're angry or they're being difficult, that the first thing that's coming out of their mouth is what they really want or what they really need, right? Oftentimes, that might be the first time that the person is saying that out loud, right? Hearing themselves say it out loud. So whenever you're restating and summarizing back to them what you heard, it might be the first time that they're ever hearing anyone say it back to them. And they might say like, oh, well, actually, maybe I don't really mean that, or actually I mean this, right? So you are helping the person get clear on what they're actually upset about, what they actually need, and what they actually want. I went to a seminar once, and they had us talk about, something challenging that was going on in the workplace, and they only allowed us to ask questions, right? And what that taught me is that so often what we perceive as the problem is not actually the problem. Because when you ask more and more questions, you realize that it's something else. There's something more at a root cause. And it made me realize how many times I gave quick advice, because that's just my personality. I want to fix things. I want to give quick advice. I want to resolve the problem and move on. But so oftentimes when you're doing that and you're not taking the time to really hear them out, hear their emotions, get to the bottom of it, the advice that you're giving is just a Band-Aid, and it might actually be bad advice. So you need to be curious and help this person process and get down into that bottom part of the iceberg so that if it is where you need to be giving some advice or some insight, you can be approaching the appropriate problem, not what is at the surface. Does that make sense? All right. A big caution that you want to take when you're active listening is, don't interrupt, don't judge or criticize, right? Like when you're doing your summarizing or advice, like you need to control your tone. When you are listening, you need to control your face, right? So much of body language, and you don't want to be sitting there like rolling your eyes or whatever, making a face as you're listening. So try to be neutral. Try to control your facial expressions. Like I said, withhold giving advice or suggestions until you've really gotten to the bottom of the problem. You feel like you fully understand what the person has brought to you, and there isn't more under the surface. Don't be, one of those people that when somebody needs to have someone listen to them, that, as soon as you hear them out, you just start bringing up all your experiences and everything that's happened to you. And this exact same thing happened to me. It can make people feel invalidated or like you just want to talk about yourself. Don't be planning your response. That's the hardest one. And making assumptions. And this is why it's important to be curious, right? And ask these questions, because what you assume about this person and the problem could be very inaccurate. And if you don't allow yourself to be curious and go in with an open mind, you're going to be stunting the process. So we're actually going to give you an opportunity to practice some of these skills of active listening, trying to summarize and restate what you heard, and then asking some clarifying questions. So Emma is going to share in the chat a Google Doc, and it has some instructions on there. But basically, there is a couple prompts on there to choose from. We're going to put you in breakout groups of 3, and you're each going to take turns answering the question, having someone listen, summarize, restate, asking clarifying questions, and then you just go through that. Great, it's nice to see everybody back. I just like, at least 2 people, if you could just share, how that felt, what was challenging about it, what did you learn about it, just for the good of the group.
Well, within our group, a lot of good questions were asked. And one particular question that I liked was asking, did the person have an ally that they could kind of engage to assist with the situation? So a lot of good dialogue.
Excellent.
In our group, I liked how one of the people who were asking the questions were kind of feeding towards having the person think about some solutions. And so instead of just asking for more detail to ensure understanding, they went a step further and said, well, what do you think needs to be done to make that better? And I thought that was really good and helped kind of diffuse and point the person in the direction of helping themselves.
Yeah, that's excellent and a great point. How you frame your questions can just be so helpful. Because one of the things that I've dealt with in intake, especially if people there's been a long history of things that have gone on, right? You need to let them pop the top, right? Enough to get the feelings out and like you've heard them, right? But you don't want to ask too many type of questions that get them rolling into the past, right? Because that might just make them more and more angry. Like they're just digging deeper and deeper and deeper. All the things that happened, he said and she said, and you wouldn't believe, and blah, 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 right? So that's an excellent point, right? You want to hear them out, but then you want to, as quickly as possible, get them into the, what is your desired outcome, right? So ask a couple clarifying questions, make sure you understand what the real problem is, but then getting them into that more, well, what do you want? What is your desired outcome? How would you have done something differently, right? Like getting them into the future, forward moving, where there's hope, right? Rather than swirling in all the anger in the past and all of those things. So yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. Very, very important point. Does anyone have anything else they would like to share, or do they have any questions about the slides that we just covered, about active listening, clarifying questions, anything like that?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
One of the things that I know is that we all have a limited amount of time that we can usually invest in any one particular issue. Do you have any suggestions for time management in order to keep things moving along? You know, to make things specific enough to get succinct answers.
Yeah, so I mean, it depends on what the level of the conflict is, right? Like it might, I mean, you should and could be active listening all of the time in all your meetings and your interactions with people and all of those things. And if it's not a complicated problem, or you're just, you know, doing a meeting, you're trying to work towards a process, right? It's not really going to take that much extra time. But if you know that there is like a conflict in the workplace and there's something that, you know, you need to get to the bottom of, then you're just going to have to you have to find the time, right? You have to make the time, because if people don't pop that top, if they don't get heard, if the emotions don't get recognized and addressed, and it keeps getting buried, right? It's like conflict is hard to deal with, but in the long run, it's harder not to deal with it, you know? So it is a balance between, we got to get stuff done, there's business, there's time, you know, things need to get done, and then, but it's people doing it. And if we don't take care of the people and manage the people and the human part of it, the business and the tasks just aren't going to get done. But I know that is a great point. That is a challenging part of it. But hopefully, if you can kind of in your workplace culture get these skills out there. I mean, I'm going to send you the slides. You can you can use these to talk to your employees about it. That once people have these skills, it may take time to invest in that and to do a culture shift. But then hopefully it's going to save time on the back end, right? Because maybe we're not going to let things boil up to the point to where they're up to here and it's this whole drama and thing that we got to work through and whatever, right? So yeah, great point, great question.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
How do you deal with type A personalities who come to you with an issue? They're not interested in the questions, how you feel, how did this come? They just want a solution.
So actually we, in the next part of the training, I'm going to be getting into the different types of personalities and some solutions for how to deal with them. So I'll just take that as a good cue to like get back to the slides, and we'll continue on with that, okay?
Okay.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. Oh, okay. So, you know, after you did that activity, you might be asking me, and it's kind of coming up in some of your questions, right? Like, well, sure, active listening is good and all, but what about for the people that are really angry? What about for the people that are really upset? And you know, I deal with this a lot. Like I said, I've dealt with some very angry parents, and for good reason, right? Things are emotional when it's your children involved. So I like to talk about our inner dragon, right? So don't fear the dragon, trust the process. And so the process kind of goes from left to right, right? Somebody gets hurt, they're upset, they're sad, and then they might start coming off as very standoffish, rude, short, things like that. And then they might just come off as very angry, right? And a lot of fire could be spewing and coming out. And this is the part where you just have to accept that if you're in a position where like part of your job is managing conflict, is that you have to accept that you're that person that needs to help this person let this out. And that doesn't mean that, you know, you need to tolerate someone, you know, cursing at you or being disrespectful or, you know, harassment, nothing like that, right? But if someone's just angry and upset and frustrated, and I've had situations where I was like, whoa, like there's no way that this parent is going to come to an agreement with the school. They're like way too angry. But what you find is when you've told the person what you're there to talk about and that you're there to help, and as the fire comes out, right, for what normally happens, right, because some of these people do this as a protective mechanism, right? I'm hurt, so I'm just going to get big and scary and angry and spew a bunch of lava and fire, right, so that nobody messes with me and we don't have to discuss this, we don't have to deal with this, and it actually can be like an avoidant tactic, right? But if you remain calm and you don't react and you don't escalate and get angry back and defensive back like they're probably used to doing with most people, and you remain calm and you just summarize, restate, ask clarifying questions, and keep coming back to the point of the conversation, there's only so much fire that people have in their belly, right? And then eventually it's just going to be smoke that's coming out. So just try to remain calm, manage your own emotions, and trust the process. And you might not ever get to, the super happy dragon all the way over on the right, but sometimes it does happen, but at least you can get the person calmed down enough to where you can help transition them out of the emotional mind into the rational mind and ready to do some problem solving. So don't fear the dragon. Don't fear those angry people, right? Because really deep down, they're just sad or upset about something or afraid. Okay, so we talked a lot about listening. Now we're going to talk a little bit about speaking because it is important with certain difficult personalities. We need to speak assertively, right? And in any situation, we need to practice assertive speaking. And also, when we're careful about what we say, we can mitigate conflict, right? Because if we focus about the present situation and we are speaking only about ourselves and we're not doing the well, she said and he said and it's because them and da 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 and I heard and all of these things that could end up kind of like putting coals back on the fire, then how we say and talk can actually help to cool down the conflict and the difficult situation. Because human beings, we like mirror each other, right, in our behavior. So if someone comes out all irate and angry, the more irate and angry you're going to get, the more irate and angry they're going to get. But if you're calm and you're neutral and you're slowing down your speech, because that's a big thing when people are upset, right? It's fast, it's escalating. But as you like speak calmly, softly, slowly, you put pauses in what you're saying, you're just naturally going to affect the situation and the other person, right? And when you're demonstrating that you're not afraid of all the fire and the flames and the anger and the whatever, and that you're just going to do the process and what you need to do, that you're going to speak for yourself, say what you mean and mean what you say, you're going to say how you feel and say the facts, like what happened, when it happened, and then why you feel the way that you do, and then express what your desired outcomes are too, right? So just as what you're trying to help the other person do and get to, that's what you're modeling for the person so they can mimic that behavior. So, sometimes despite our best efforts, right, to listen and speak assertively and all of those things, there's still challenges with specific personality types. And right now we're at 9:15, so we might not get through like each one of these types, but I have a handout to send you and you'll have the slides where it goes into more detail with each type. But we're just kind of going to go through, and if anyone has any comments or they'd like to add to the discussion, then we can do that before we wrap up. So there's 4 main types that we've lumped these into: the aggressive/hostile type, the pessimistic people, the stubborn people, and the passive people. So with this first group, right, you have the charging bulls. These are the people that are coming in very aggressively and trying to intimidate. The exploders, these are the people that are more of like your adult temper tantrum kind of people, where you almost just like are kind of shocked by how they're reacting. And then you also have the wolves, and the wolves are kind of more of your like gaslighters, right? Like they'll be the kind of person that say something offensive and then say, well, I'm just kidding, can't you just take a joke, and some strategies for how to deal with these people is you need to stand up for yourself and use assertive speaking, right? Ask direct questions and don't argue. Do not mirror back to them the aggressive and hostile behavior that they're mirroring back to you, because that's just going to cause you to circle the drain, right? If you're in a meeting, and we teach this, and we have a meeting facilitation class that we teach, and this will also be covered in our mediation training, where we teach you how to develop an agenda and how to develop ground rules. So you can start, if you know that you're going to have a meeting where there's going to be some difficult people or specifically aggressive or hostile people, you can start the meeting by sending out an agenda beforehand with ground rules on it, and then you open the meeting reviewing the agenda, reviewing what the ground rules are, right? Like no, like if you know somebody tends to like to curse in a meeting, right? You can put that as a ground rule of like no offensive language. And how you get everyone to stick to that is as you're saying them, you're like you're saying, like, can we all agree to that? And you look around and you get the head nod, and you get the head nod, right? And it's kind of forcing them to agree to a set of rules in the beginning, so that as the meeting's going on or the situation or whatever, if they start to break those ground rules, you now have grounds, right, to say, hey, listen, we all agreed into the beginning not to use offensive language. I just want to remind everybody of that. And they are now accountable to everyone else in the group because they agreed to that in the beginning. And make sure they have time to speak, but not all of the time. So this is another thing too, where you're, if you know this person tends to try to escalate things, you want to make sure that they're not totally silenced, because that's just going to make them maybe more aggressive or more hostile. But you don't want to give them total uninterrupted time where they might just take over the whole meeting or the whole situation. Yeah, does anyone have any comments about this before we move on, or would we prefer that I just kind of try to get through the rest of them, and then if there's time for questions at the end, we'll do that. Okay, we'll do that. I saw some head nods. Okay, the next group is your pessimists, and this is I love this one for the complainer. I found a sandwich in one of your parks, and I don't know why it didn't have any mayonnaise. You know, like they're the kind of person that you're trying to get something done, and they're just kind of whining and complaining about something that really isn't pertinent to the situation, doesn't have anything to add, right? And typically complainers are the type of people that really they're seeking kind of empathy or attention or recognition, but they're just seeking it in a negative way, right? There's some people who seek positive attention, some people who seek negative. The negativist, this is the person that no matter how good the plan is, like they're always pointing out why this isn't going to work, and we tried this in the past, and this just will never work. You know, they're just always bringing up the negative. And some strategies to deal with pessimists is, you know, break the cycle by insisting on problem solving, right? You know, ask some clarifying questions to hear what their concerns are, but then you have to ask them, like, what is your desired outcome? What do you think that we should do? Because a lot of times complainers or negativists, they're the pointers, right? They're quick to complain or comment on why something won't work. But then if you put it back on them and say, like, okay, well, what do you think we should do? How would you resolve this problem? It's kind of bringing them in to understand that if they have negative comments or complaints, then they're going to be asked to respond to help solve the problem. And if that's not something they really want to do, that might mitigate their desire to complain or add negative comments if they're going to be asked to help solve it, right? Focus on the facts. And yeah, again, don't argue or dismiss. Make sure you allow the problem to be fully discussed, right? And that might not be in a meeting, it might be privately or on the side, right? But just kind of refunneling and channeling that negative or complaining energy into something positive, into something future focused is probably the best strategy for dealing with pessimists. Stubborn. This is your bulldozers, right? These are the people who are super confident, a lot of experience, very technically savvy in their work and their job, and they're generally like good leaders, but they're bad on the kind of people and soft skills and can be kind of rude. And then your balloons, these are the people who like wish they were bulldozers, right? They wish that they were super confident and great at their job and knew everything and experienced. But because they aren't yet, They have to inflate themselves to being, kind of bigger and more than they are, right, at the current moment. The best advice or strategy for a balloon, you never, 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 ever, ever want to pop a balloon in public, right? So if you're in a meeting and you have a balloon and they're, I don't know, making some suggestion or acting like they have all this expertise or something like that, you don't want to embarrass them in front of the group by like calling them out in front of the group or correcting them in front of the whole group, because that could quickly turn a balloon person into an aggressive or hostile person. So if you do have someone that's like that, you want to give them constructive criticism, but you want to pull them aside to give that. Never correct them in front of the group, right? That's going to make them very upset. So help them to consider alternative views while avoiding direct challenges to their expertise or self-image, right? Keep it more to where you are doing like a battling of ideas rather than saying anything kind of personally about them, because they'll be quickly offended by that and want to defend it. They care very much about their self-image and the prestige or credibility that they've built. So you never want to challenge that, especially in a public way. The best thing you can do is acknowledge, right? Like if you want to disagree with a stubborn person, just start off by acknowledging like, oh, like I understand, you've been doing this for so many years, you have all this experience, blase, blase. And then, offering your criticism, your counter viewpoint, because that might placate them enough to be able to continue forward in the conversation. And being assertive, right? These are people that respect competence. So if you come forward being confident and assertive in what you're saying, they will see you more as an equal rather than someone to kind of dominate or control or not take seriously or push to the side. Passive. Your indecisive stallers, I like to call them your head nodders. So these are the people that will be super pumped for whatever is going on and, will just head nod like, yeah. You'll give them a task and you're like, oh, can you do this for me? Yeah, totally, definitely, yeah. And they'll just be nodding their head. And then, you'll go back a week later and be like, hey, did you do X, Y, or Z? And they will just look at you like a deer in headlights, like, or they'll start avoiding or making all these excuses or, and then the clams, these are people, you have no idea what they're thinking, right? They're so quiet, they're very introverted, and you never know quite what's on their mind, right? So to deal with passives is you want to listen for indirect words, hesitations, and omissions that may provide clues to the areas that they're stuck on. So specifically with the indecisive stallers, I like to, in the military, we call it a confirmation brief, right? Where I would give a subordinate a task and then I make them say the task back to me and then tell me how they're going to do it. So that and it doesn't have to be right on the spot, right? Depending on the complexity of the task, I might have a follow-up meeting with them to say like, all right, well, walk me through how you plan on doing X, Y, or Z. And then I can kind of catch that in the upfront or help mentor them to get them on the right path to doing the task rather than getting upset with them because when the deadline was due and I asked it to be done, they didn't really know what they were doing and they didn't ask questions because they just want to be the positive, helpful person, right? And then with the passive people, the clams, you just have to ask open-ended questions, right? They may be the person where you have to turn to them in the meeting and say, like, what do you think about that? What do you have to add? You might have to invite them more into the discussion because they aren't necessarily going to include themselves. And just being comfortable with silence, especially with the clam. Sometimes you just need to out-silence the clam, right? If they just want to give you a one-word answer or something like that, just sit in the silence, tilt your head, look in, right, to kind of look like you're trying to get more, and hopefully that'll work too. We use that a lot in mediation as well, being comfortable with silence. And the final thing I just want to point here is that conflict is not something to be afraid of. Most of us learn conflict from our families, and that's not always the best place to learn it from. But once you actually decide to learn about conflict resolution and management, it gives you a set of skills and a process that shows you that there's not a dead end, right? There's actually a lot of ways to deal with these situations. And it empowers you to be more confident in your personal life, your work life, and it's just so great. So I just really encourage all of you to don't let the training on this like stop here. Keep looking into conflict resolution. I'm definitely going to share our website and our materials with Emma. We have a lot of free resources on our website, and hope that you'll come to the mediation training and learn even more skills. And I really appreciate you having me here. And if I'm happy to, stay on, but I also want to be respectful of people's time. If anyone has any questions, I will stay on to answer them. But other than that, that's it.
Thank you so much, Danielle. I am going to share the credit codes for this session today for anyone who wants their SHRM or HRCI codes. But thank you, Danielle. This was tremendous. Does anyone have any questions for Danielle? Feel free to chime in. Everyone's saying in the chat, thank you. Great tools, very helpful. Awesome. And
This is Frank. I just wanted to share that Danielle's training, that basic mediation with University of Delaware, is awesome training. I attended a few years ago, but I can tell you it is time well spent. It's a valuable resource, and Danielle and her team do an awesome job. So I just wanted to share my appreciation for all of the good learning that's provided.
This is Wanda Spearing. I just want to say I appreciated the breakout session, and I got something from it just in that short 10 minutes. I felt understood. I felt almost a bond building between me and the other two people in the group, even though it was just a few minutes. I felt so good afterwards, thinking how great this would be if this had gone on for 20 minutes or more, a half hour or something, that we would have been a support for each other, and it felt really like a great experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wanda and Frank, both for saying that. Frank actually comes and he's a coach a lot of times at our mediation training, so he's always giving back and being supportive. So we appreciate you, Frank. And Wanda, it's so true, right? Like, it's once you learn it, it's so simple and it's so basic and it's very powerful, because you're just like, oh man, like if we could just always be doing this, we would just all just be a lot happier, So thank you for saying that. And
thank you.
Yeah, anyone else? Appreciate all of the lovely comments. Oh, it looks like there was a question. Oh, where can I find them? Yeah, so Emma will send out an email with our website link and the slides, and I'll also give you a handout on the difficult people, so you can review that. And I just really encourage you to take these slides and have like a little lunch and learn, like at your work. You know what I mean? Review the handout, have these discussions, ask some discussion questions, getting people to talk about this and think about it and why is it important. It's a great thing to do. You don't have to do the whole thing in an hour, right? You could kind of chunk it up or talk about one type every day or something like that. But it's all these soft skill things that are, often under focused on in the workplace, but that just pay dividends, right? When you're reminding people of them and you're practicing them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Danielle. I think we're all set right at 9:31. Check us out. Excellent timing. Feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. Like Danielle said, we'll share information in a follow-up email to you tomorrow, and feel free to reach out to me at info@delawareshrm.org if you have any other questions, or perhaps you didn't get that email. It'll go out in about 24 hours. So thank you again, Danielle. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Have a good one.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Bye.